The sun was setting over Cape Haven when Emily finally let herself breathe. Hours of smiling for strangers, hours of pretending her heart wasn't pounding in dread, had left her drained. Now the reception was over, the guests gone, and only silence lingered in the presidential suite of North Carolina's most exclusive resort. She slipped off her heels, wincing as her toes touched the cool marble, and leaned against the wide window. Outside, the ocean stretched endless and glittering, as if mocking the storm inside her chest. Behind her, the sound of a jacket being laid across a chair broke the stillness. She turned, and her new husband filled the room. Liam Blackwood. At 42, he was every inch the man magazines described. Tall, dark-haired, gray-eyed, shoulders sharp as stone, power clung to him like a second skin, and his presence left no corner untouched. He poured himself a whiskey from the bar without asking, the ice clinking against crystal. "A little tired?" he asked, his deep voice so even it startled her. "A little," Emily admitted, clutching her dress at the waist. She wanted to appear calm, wanted to seem like the sophisticated wife he had bargained for, but the tremor in her voice betrayed her. Liam studied her with the same intensity he might use on an opponent across a boardroom table. "Would you like something to drink?" "Water," she whispered, and when he handed her the glass, their fingers brushed. The contact sent a shiver rushing through her, sharp and uninvited. She forced herself to look up, expecting cold detachment. Instead, she found curiosity. It wasn't warmth, not yet, but it was enough to unsettle her. "Emily," he said, speaking her name like he was testing its weight. "We need to talk about expectations." Her stomach tightened. This was the moment she had dreaded. The contract had been clear. She was here to play her part, to ensure her family's debts were buried by his wealth. He would protect their reputation, and in return, she would belong to him. Simple, cold, necessary. She nodded quickly. "I understand the agreement, Liam. You don't have to worry." His eyes narrowed, not with anger, but something harder to define. He set his glass down, walked closer until she caught the scent of his cologne. Woody, masculine, dangerously intoxicating. "It's not about the agreement," he said softly. "It's about tonight." Her pulse stuttered. She had braced for this, rehearsed the inevitability of surrender. But the way he stood before her now made every practiced word vanish. She opened her mouth, only to find her voice stolen by the flicker of vulnerability crossing his face. His control faltered, just for an instant, and she saw not the ruthless mogul the world feared, but a man carrying a weight no one else could see. "You're scared," he observed, not as a question, but as a truth. Emily's throat tightened. "A little." He stepped back, giving her space. His gaze softened, surprising her. "You don't need to be. I'm not the monster they write about. At least, not with you." Her breath caught. For weeks she had imagined cruelty, indifference, an endless prison of ice. Yet here he was, telling her she had nothing to fear. And somehow, she believed him. Silence stretched, heavy and fragile. He reached for her hand, and when his fingers enclosed hers, he leaned closer. His voice dropped, low enough to almost be lost in the sound of the surf outside. "May I continue?" The question stunned her. Not a demand, not a command, a request, a choice. Her heart pounded so loudly she thought he must hear it. In that moment, everything shifted. The arrangement, the contract, the fear, all of it bent beneath the weight of that one whispered question. She saw in his eyes a promise, unspoken but real. He would never take what she wasn't willing to give. Emily swallowed hard, her lips parting to answer. She didn't know if she was ready for love, but she knew this. Her life, cold as it had seemed, had just cracked open to a possibility she hadn't dared to dream. And with his words lingering in the air between them, she realized that sometimes the most terrifying men are not those who demand, but those who wait. The morning sun poured through the terrace windows, golden light spilling across the breakfast table set with fresh berries, croissants, and steaming coffee. To any onlooker, it would have seemed like the perfect honeymoon scene, but Emily sat stiff in her chair, her spoon circling through untouched yogurt as her heart tightened in her chest. She could still feel the echo of Liam's voice from the night before, that careful whisper asking permission, that gentleness that had broken every expectation she had built. For a few precious hours, she had felt safe, cherished, almost wanted. And now, in the clear light of day, it all felt like a dream she wasn't allowed to keep. Across the table, Liam was already dressed in a crisp white shirt, his tablet propped against the fruit bowl, eyes moving over emails as though nothing unusual had happened. His hair was perfect, his posture rigid, his expression unreadable. He looked like the man the business world knew, a fortress of control and power. The vulnerable man who had touched her with reverence in the dark was nowhere to be found. She cleared her throat softly. Liam. He looked up briefly, polite, distant, his gray eyes cool and professional. Yes. About last night, she began, hoping, praying for a crack in his mask, for any sign that what had passed between them meant more than duty. But he raised a hand, silencing her, his gaze sharp and unyielding. We need to establish some rules. Her stomach dropped. Rules. He leaned back, his tone clipped, almost clinical. Now that we have fulfilled the expectations of our marriage, it is important we understand the boundaries moving forward. In public, we will be what the world expects of newlyweds. Smiles, affectionate gestures, charity events, business dinners. You will be elegant, poised, the perfect wife. Emily felt each word like a stone sinking into her chest, and in private she asked, though her voice already trembled with dread. In private, he continued without hesitation, we maintain distance, separate rooms, separate lives. What happened last night was necessary to validate the marriage, but it will not be repeated. For a moment, she could only stare at him, the memory of his hands, his tenderness, his whispered question burning inside her like a cruel joke. He had made her feel safe, seen, almost loved, and now he reduced it to paperwork, to validation. I see, she managed, her voice colder than she felt. So I'm just a very well-paid employee. His eyes flicked up sharply, something dangerous flashing for an instant. You're being dramatic. Dramatic. The word ignited something fierce inside her. She pushed back her chair, the scrape of wood against stone loud in the morning quiet. You treated me like something precious last night. You made me believe you cared whether I was afraid or safe, and now you tell me it was just business. If that is not reason for drama, I don't know what is. His jaw tightened, fists clenching on the napkin in his lap. Emily, stop. No. She leaned across the table, fire in her voice. You can pretend it meant nothing, but we both know you are lying. The question is why. The silence that followed was a battle in itself. For an instant she saw it, the flicker of struggle in his eyes, the weight of something unspoken pressing against his walls. Then the mask slammed back into place, and he answered with ice. What I felt, or didn't feel, is irrelevant. This is a bus-in-s arrangement. Accept that, and you will find it easier. Her heart fractured, but she refused to let him see her bleed. Straightening her shoulders, she nodded once. Fine, you want a perfect wife in public and distance in private, then you shall have exactly that. But do not expect me to be grateful. She lifted her purse with steady hands and walked toward the terrace door. At the threshold she paused and glanced back, her voice steady as a blade. You can deny it all you want, Liam Blackwood, but we both know last night was not business. It was something you are too afraid to admit. She left him at the table, alone with his coffee and his silence. And for the first time in years, Liam felt the certainty of his rules falter. Because deep down he knew she was right, and that terrified him more than any business rival ever could. The limousine swept through the winding mountain roads until the Blackwood estate came into view, an imposing mansion of glass and stone perched high above the valley. To the outside world it looked like a castle built for a king, but to Emily it felt like a fortress designed to keep people out. The gates closed behind them with a heavy clang, sealing her inside a life that didn't feel like her own. Liam guided her through the vast entrance hall, his footsteps echoing across marble floors polished so bright they mirrored the chandeliers. Every detail was perfect, curated, expensive, yet it was the kind of perfection that left no room for warmth. Emily's heels clicked against the floor as her eyes swept the soaring ceilings and cold modern artwork. This was not a home. This was a monument to control. Mrs. Chen, the housekeeper, appeared almost silently, her posture graceful and her eyes unreadable. "She will show you to your room," Liam said, his voice low, detached, as if announcing a business transaction rather than welcoming his new wife. "Opposite side of the house from mine. You will have privacy." The words stung more than she expected. Privacy was just another way of saying distance. She forced a polite smile and followed Mrs. Chen up the curved staircase, leaving Liam standing in the cavernous hall below, a solitary figure surrounded by walls he had built long before she arrived. The guest wing that would now be hers was beautiful, with silk curtains framing a view of the manicured gardens, but Emily saw only a gilded cage. She stepped onto the balcony, the mountain air sharp against her skin, and told herself she would not break. If he wanted distance, she would give him distance, but she would not disappear. Somewhere behind those gray eyes was the man who had whispered a question on their wedding night instead of taking what the contract had promised him. That man existed, and she would not let him vanish completely into the cold mask he wore. That night, the mansion was too quiet. The wind pressed against the windows, and every creak of the house echoed through the empty halls. Emily found herself wandering into the library, a vast room lined with shelves that reached the ceiling. Dust lay thick on some of the books, as though they were only for decoration. She ran her hand across the spines, feeling the weight of time and silence pressing in around her. She froze when she heard footsteps, heavy, deliberate. Liam entered, loosening his tie, his expression darker than she had ever seen. He didn't notice her at first. His movements were sharp, restless, as he poured a drink and dropped into the leather chair by the fire. The flames lit his face, and for the first time she saw weariness etched into his features, shadows beneath his eyes that no amount of power could hide. Emily remained hidden behind the shelves, her breath caught. She had never seen him like this, stripped of control, vulnerable in solitude. He sat there staring into the fire, jaw tight, glass trembling faintly in his hand. For a man who ruled boardrooms without mercy, he looked suddenly breakable. She took one small step forward, and the floor creaked. His head snapped up, eyes narrowing in the dim light. "Emily," he said, his voice hoarse as though her name had been torn from somewhere deep. "I didn't know you were here." Her heart pounded as she stepped fully into the firelight. "You looked like you needed someone." For a moment, neither spoke. The crackle of the fire filled the silence, and the tension between them stretched taut. Then he gestured to the chair across from him. "Sit if you want." Emily crossed the room, every step heavy with unspoken questions. She sat, folding her hands in her lap, and finally asked the thing that had been burning inside her since the wedding. "Liam, why do you keep pushing me away?" He looked at her for a long time, the firelight flickering in his storm-gray eyes. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and rough. "Because the last time I let someone close, she destroyed me." The words hung in the air, heavier than the stone walls around them. Emily's breath caught, sensing she had stepped onto dangerous ground, the beginning of a truth that could either break them apart forever or finally draw them together. And outside the windows, storm clouds gathered over the mountains, as though the sky itself knew that something powerful was about to begin. The storm broke late in the afternoon, heavy rain hammering against the glass walls of the mansion, as if the mountain itself was under siege. Emily sat in the library where she had been reading, though the words on the page blurred before her eyes. The echo of Liam's confession still haunted her. "Because the last time I let someone close, she destroyed me." He had offered no more than that, retreating into silence, leaving her with fragments of a truth that burned with more questions than answers. The door creaked open and Liam entered, his gray eyes darker than the storm outside. He didn't notice her at first, his steps quick and restless, his hand dragging through his damp hair as though he was fighting invisible demons. He poured a drink but didn't touch it, only stared at the amber liquid as though it contained memories he wished he could forget. Emily's heart raced. She wanted to flee, to give him the distance he always demanded, but something stronger kept her rooted. He looked like a man standing at the edge of a cliff, and she couldn't bear to let him fall alone. "Rough day?" she asked softly, breaking the silence. He jolted slightly, the whiskey sloshing in his glass. His head turned, his gaze finding her where she sat near the fire. For a moment, his mask slipped. "Yes," he said, after a pause. "Something like that." She closed the book in her lap and leaned forward. "Sometimes talking helps." His laugh was sharp and hollow. "Talking has never saved me from anything." "But you're carrying something." She pressed gently. "Something heavy." His jaw worked, his eyes fixed on the fire as if he couldn't look at her. "Betrayal doesn't fade, Emily. It doesn't heal with time. It just teaches you to build walls so high no one can ever climb them again." Her chest tightened. He had never spoken to her like this before, never exposed even a glimpse of his wounds. "Who betrayed you?" she asked softly. Finally his eyes met hers, and she saw it, the raw ache beneath the steel. "Her name was Deborah. My wife. 5 years. And for 2 of them she was sleeping with the man I trusted most. My business partner. They were planning to strip everything from me: money, company, reputation." He looked away again, his voice shaking despite his control. "I found out by accident. I confronted her and she didn't even deny it. She laughed, told me I was a fool for thinking anyone could love a man like me." Emily's breath caught. The cruelty of it cut deep, even though the wound wasn't hers. She rose from her chair, unable to stay distant. "You are not a fool," she said firmly. "You're a man who was hurt by someone unworthy of you. Don't punish yourself for her sins, and don't punish me either." He looked up at her sharply. "And what if you're like her? What if you're waiting for your moment to break me too?" Anger flared in Emily's chest. "I have done nothing but try to honor this arrangement. I've been the perfect wife in public, invisible in private, exactly as you demanded. And still you see me as a threat." She stepped closer, her voice fierce. "I am not Deborah. I will never be Deborah." The storm thundered outside, lightning flashing across the room, illuminating the raw tension between them. Liam stood abruptly, towering over her, his fists clenched as if holding himself back. "You don't understand," he said, his voice ragged. "You could destroy me without even trying." Her breath trembled, but she didn't back away. "Then let me prove I won't." His gray eyes searched hers, storm against storm, and for the first time he looked uncertain. His hand lifted, hesitated, then brushed against her cheek as though testing if she was real. "God help me, Emily," he whispered. "I want you. Not for appearances, not for business. I want you for real, and that terrifies me." Her pulse hammered in her throat. "Then don't run," she whispered back. "Don't hide from me anymore." For one aching second he leaned closer, his eyes falling to her lips, the firelight casting shadows across his face. The air between them crackled with unspoken promises. Then he pulled back suddenly, retreating as if burned, grabbing his glass and striding from the library before she could breathe. Emily stood rooted to the spot, the storm raging inside her louder than the one outside. She had seen the truth in his eyes, the war he fought between desire and fear, and she knew this was only the beginning. Somewhere deep inside Liam Blackwood was a man desperate to love and be loved, and she had just placed herself directly in the path of his breaking heart. The storm returned 2 nights later, fiercer than before. Wind rattled the windows of the mountain mansion, and rain lashed against the glass like 1,000 desperate fists. Emily stood on her balcony, the silk curtains snapping in the draft, watching lightning tear through the sky. The storm outside felt like a mirror of the one inside her. She hadn't seen Liam since their confrontation in the library. He had buried himself in work, leaving early, returning late, keeping to his wing of the house as though avoiding her presence was his only way to survive. Then she heard it. The slam of the front door echoed through the house, reverberating up the marble staircase. She froze. It was nearly midnight. Liam wasn't supposed to return until the next day. Heavy footsteps climbed the stairs, urgent, uneven, almost frantic. Her pulse quickened as the steps stopped outside her door. "Emily," he called softly. "Are you awake?" She crossed the room and opened the door, her breath catching when she saw him. His suit was soaked through, dark hair plastered to his forehead, his eyes wild with a hunger she had never seen. Water dripped from his shoulders, forming a small pool on the floor beneath him, but he didn't seem to notice. "My God, you are soaked," she whispered. "What happened?" "The meeting ended early," he said, but his voice faltered. He shifted, unable to meet her gaze. The truth slipped out in a raw confession. "I couldn't stay away." Her chest tightened. He had driven through a storm, risked the mountain roads, just to return to her. The air between them was charged, dangerous, alive. "You need to change out of those wet clothes before you get sick," she said, clinging to practicality while her heart raced. "Can I come in?" he asked. His voice was no longer cold and commanding, but almost fragile, uncertain. She nodded and stepped aside. He entered, dripping water across the Persian rug, and stopped before the fireplace. His shoulders sagged, the exhaustion of a man who had been fighting something far greater than the storm. Emily hurried to the bathroom, returning with towels. When she lifted one to his face and began drying his hair, he closed his eyes with a sound that was closer to a sigh of surrender. "Emily," he murmured low. "I shouldn't be here." "Then why are you?" she asked. Her hands still moving gently across his face, his eyes opened, and what she saw there stole her breath. It wasn't just desire, it was desperation, need, as though he were drowning and she was the air he couldn't live without. "Because pretending I don't feel anything is killing me," he confessed. Her heart thundered. "Then stop pretending." His jaw tightened. "I can't. If I let myself feel everything I do for you, I won't survive when you leave me." She didn't flinch. "Who said I'm going to leave you?" The question hung between them like lightning suspended in the sky. His hands rose to cover hers where they cupped his face, and she felt the tremor in his touch. "Deborah knew me for 5 years, and still she managed to destroy me," he whispered. "You've known me for weeks, and you already have the power to ruin me completely." Emily held his gaze steady. "I'm not her Liam. I won't hurt you." For a long moment the storm roared around them, but neither moved. Then his control shattered. He bent closer, his breath mingling with hers, his gray eyes filled with fear and hunger, and something that felt dangerously close to love. "May I continue?" he asked again, his voice breaking like the storm outside. Her lips parted with trembling certainty. "Yes." The kiss that followed was not gentle. It was fire against rain, years of loneliness crashing into desperate need. He pulled her against him as though afraid she would vanish, and she clung to him as though he were the only solid thing left in the world. When lightning lit the room, she saw the truth in his face. The walls had fallen. The man who had built an empire out of control had finally surrendered, not to weakness, but to her. And as the storm raged on through the night, Emily realized she was no longer afraid to die. She was exactly where she was meant to be. The storm had passed, but its memory lingered in the quiet glow of dawn. Emily stirred first, her cheek pressed against Liam's chest, his steady heartbeat beneath her ear. For a moment she was afraid to move, afraid the fragile intimacy of the night would vanish with the morning light. She turned slowly, studying his face softened in sleep, so different from the cold mask he wore in the day. It was the face of a man who had surrendered, if only for a night. When his eyes opened, she braced herself, expecting regret, expecting distance. Instead, his gaze was warm, unguarded, and his lips curved into a small smile. "Good morning," he murmured, his voice rough with sleep. Relief flooded her, so sharp it almost made her cry. "Better than I have in weeks," she admitted. "And you?" His hand brushed down her arm in a lazy caress. "I haven't slept that well in years." She laughed softly, but there was still fear beneath her joy. "Liam," she began, but he silenced her with a kiss, gentle this time, lingering. "Don't say it was a mistake," he whispered. Let me have this at least a little longer. That's not what I was going to say, she replied, touching his face. I don't regret any of it, not a moment. Something shifted in his eyes, something deeper than relief. You don't understand what you're asking for. Emily, he said softly, I am not a man without scars. I am not easy to love. Then let me learn, she answered firmly. Let me prove that not everyone leaves you bleeding. From that day forward, the mansion began to change. Liam came home earlier. He lingered over dinners instead of rushing through them. Their evenings, once filled with silence, turned into long conversations that stretched past midnight. Emily discovered that he laughed easily when he was truly amused, that he loved astronomy and kept a hidden observatory at the top of the house, that he secretly funded scholarships for children who would never know his name. Mrs. Chen noticed too. One afternoon, as Emily helped her arrange flowers in the hall, she said quietly, He smiles more since you arrived. He seems more alive. Emily blushed, but she felt it too. The cold fortress of the mansion began to hum with warmth. Even the air seemed different, as if the house itself was breathing again. Yet beneath the tenderness lay shadows Liam could not fully hide. Some nights she woke to find him sitting on the edge of the bed, head in his hands, haunted by dreams he could not escape. She would soothe him back to sleep, whispering promises into the darkness until he calmed. One evening he led her into the moonlit garden, the mountains rising around them like ancient guardians. Deborah hated this place, he said quietly. She thought it was too quiet. She wanted the city. And you? Emily asked. What did you want? This, he answered simply. Peace. A place where I could be myself. Can you be yourself now? She pressed. He stopped walking, turned to her in the silver light, his hand tightening around hers. With you, yes. By some miracle, yes. The words left her trembling. She knew then that she had become more than a contract. She had become the only place he felt safe. But as their world softened, shadows grew beyond the gates. Invitations arrived that Liam could no longer ignore. The Morrison Foundation charity ball, the first public test of their marriage. The world would watch closely, waiting to see cracks, waiting to decide if Emily was a wife or a scandal. Over breakfast, he told her, they'll look for weaknesses. They'll question us. Emily met his gaze with steady calm. Then we'll give them nothing to doubt. The word love hovered unspoken between them, but it was there in every look, every touch, every whispered promise in the night. What they didn't know was that love was about to be tested in ways neither of them could imagine, because storms did not only come from the sky. Some storms were human and came smiling, dressed in silk and secrets, determined to destroy everything in their path. The ballroom glittered with golden chandeliers and polished marble floors, a stage set for power and spectacle. Emily stood at the entrance on Liam's arm, her heart thundering beneath the elegant navy gown he had chosen for her. Every head turned as they walked in, conversations stuttering into silence before the whispers began. The powerful Liam Blackwood had finally brought his young wife into the lion's den of Asheville's elite, and the crowd was eager to dissect every detail. Liam leaned closer, his breath warm against her ear. Remember, they want cracks. They want proof we're pretending. Do not give them what they want. She nodded, forcing a serene smile, even as unease coiled inside her. Their marriage had begun as a contract, but tonight, standing beneath the scrutiny of 100 watching eyes, she felt the stakes were far greater than appearances. Senator Richardson was the first to approach, his wife Margaret gliding beside him like a hawk dressed in silk. Such a lovely surprise to finally meet Mrs. Blackwood. Margaret purred. Tell me, dear, how did you and Liam meet? Was it love at first sight? Emily felt the trap instantly, the unspoken challenge woven beneath the polite words. She steadied her voice. Sometimes the best things happen when you least expect them. Margaret's smile sharpened. And such a quick wedding, you must have swept him off his feet. Before Emily could answer, another voice cut through the tension. Victoria Ashford, the queen of Asheville society, drifted toward them in a gown that shimmered like frost. Her eyes scanned Emily with cold curiosity. Darling Margaret, don't interrogate the poor girl. But tell me, Liam, we all thought you'd choose someone more established. The implication struck like a blade. Emily was not one of them. She was the outsider, the interloper who had dared to steal their king. Liam's arm tightened around her waist, his voice deceptively calm. And what exactly does established mean, Victoria? But before the confrontation could explode, Emily touched his arm lightly. Dance with me. Her words were soft but commanding. He hesitated, then nodded, leading her onto the polished floor as a string quartet began to play. The crowd watched with hungry eyes as he pulled her close, their movements smooth, graceful, almost too intimate. For a few stolen minutes, the room faded away, his hand pressed against her back, his gray eyes locked on hers, and she felt strength pour through her. When the music ended, Margaret appeared again, flanked by sharp-eyed companions. Her tone was silk over steel. Rumors are swirling, my dear. People are saying the marriage was rushed for a reason. That perhaps you gave Liam no choice. The cruelty of the suggestion stabbed deep. Around them, the room grew silent, waiting, hungry for scandal. Emily could feel the weight of Liam's fury beside her, but she did not let him speak. She stepped forward, her voice carrying clear and steady. You're right. There was a reason. The reason is that when you find someone who loves you for who you truly are, you don't waste time. My husband could have married anyone here. But he chose me. Not for money, not for power, but because I see him, the man behind the empire, and I love that man with all my heart. The silence shattered as applause erupted, first tentative, then thunderous. Liam's chest swelled with pride as he pulled her close, his lips brushing her temple. You were magnificent, he whispered. But not everyone clapped. At the edge of the crowd, a tall woman with platinum hair and eyes like ice watched in silence, her lips curled into a smile that never reached her gaze. Deborah Blackwood. Emily felt the chill crawl down her spine. The storm they had weathered together was only the beginning. The real war was about to begin, and the woman who once shattered Liam's life had just declared her return. The applause from the gala still echoed in Emily's ears long after she and Liam returned to the mansion, but it wasn't victory she felt. It was the chill of eyes watching from the shadows, eyes that belonged to the woman who had nearly destroyed him once before. Deborah. The following morning, Liam was already in his office when Emily came down for breakfast. His gray eyes were fixed on a folder of legal documents, his jaw clenched. She hesitated at the door before speaking. She was there last night, wasn't she? Liam didn't look up. Deborah never misses a chance to poison the air. What does she want this time? Emily asked, though her heart already knew the answer. Everything. His voice was flat, lethal. She wants everything she lost, and more. The first blow came swiftly. A headline splashed across every society page. Blackwood marriage, a sham. Below it, photographs of Liam and Emily, carefully chosen to suggest calculation instead of love. There were blurry images of Emily walking into a Manhattan hotel long before the wedding, paired with captions that hinted at an affair while Liam was still married to Deborah. They're fabricated, Emily whispered, her hands trembling as she held the paper. I've never even been to that hotel. Liam took the newspaper from her, his eyes blazing. She's paying people to create evidence, and the world will believe her because lies always travel faster than truth. By noon, the attack escalated. Deborah went live on a talk show, dressed in black, her voice trembling as she told the nation her tale. I loved Liam with everything I had, but he betrayed me with her. This child she carries is not his, it is part of their deception. Emily watched the broadcast in horror, nausea rising in her throat. She pressed a hand to her stomach, to the fragile life growing inside her. How can she do this? She whispered. Because she wants to destroy me, Liam said grimly, and she will use you to do it. That night, the mansion was swarmed with cameras. Reporters shouted questions through the gates. Was it all a contract, Emily? Do you even love him? Is the baby even his? Emily fled into the library, her sanctuary among the books, her body shaking. Liam found her there, his face pale but his voice steady. "Emily, look at me." She lifted her tear-stained eyes to his. He stepped closer, cupping her face in his hands. "Listen to me. You are my wife. That is my child, and no matter what storm she brings, we will face it together." But even as he held her, Emily saw the flicker of doubt in his eyes. Not doubt of her, but of himself, of his ability to protect her from the world he had dragged her into. 2 days later, the summons arrived. Deborah had filed suit, demanding half his empire, claiming the divorce had been coerced, claiming the new marriage was fraudulent, and worst of all, demanding a DNA test for the unborn child. Emily sat frozen as Liam read the document aloud, his voice hard as iron. "She isn't just coming after me, she's coming after our family." The storm outside had passed, but inside the mansion a far darker storm had risen, one that threatened to tear apart everything they had built. And for the first time, Emily understood the truth. This battle wasn't about money or reputation. It was about survival. The applause from the gala still echoed in Emily's ears long after she and Liam returned to the mansion, but it wasn't victory she felt. It was the chill of eyes watching from the shadows, eyes that belonged to the woman who had nearly destroyed him once before. Deborah. The following morning, Liam was already in his office when Emily came down for breakfast. His gray eyes were fixed on a folder of legal documents, his jaw clenched. She hesitated at the door before speaking. "She was there last night, wasn't she?" Liam didn't look up. Deborah never misses a chance to poison the air. "What does she want this time?" Emily asked, though her heart already knew the answer. "Everything." His voice was flat, lethal. "She wants everything she lost and more." The first blow came swiftly. A headline splashed across every society page: "Blackwood marriage a sham." Below it, photographs of Liam and Emily, carefully chosen to suggest calculation instead of love. There were blurry images of Emily walking into a Manhattan hotel long before the wedding, paired with captions that hinted at an affair, while Liam was still married to Deborah. "They're fabricated," Emily whispered, her hands trembling as she held the paper. "I've never even been to that hotel." Liam took the newspaper from her, his eyes blazing. "She's paying people to create evidence, and the world will believe her because lies always travel faster than truth." By noon, the attack escalated. Deborah went live on a talk show, dressed in black, her voice trembling as she told the nation her tale. "I loved Liam with everything I had, but he betrayed me with her. This child she carries is not his. It is part of their deception." Emily watched the broadcast in horror, nausea rising in her throat. She pressed a hand to her stomach, to the fragile life growing inside her. "How can she do this?" she whispered. "Because she wants to destroy me," Liam said grimly. "And she will use you to do it." That night, the mansion was swarmed with cameras. Reporters shouted questions through the gates. "Was it all a contract, Emily? Do you even love him? Is the baby even his?" Emily fled into the library, her sanctuary among the books, her body shaking. Liam found her there, his face pale, but his voice steady. "Emily, look at me." She lifted her tear-stained eyes to his. He stepped closer, cupping her face in his hands. "Listen to me. You are my wife. That is my child. And no matter what storm she brings, we will face it together." But even as he held her, Emily saw the flicker of doubt in his eyes. Not doubt of her, but of himself, of his ability to protect her from the world he had dragged her into. 2 days later, the summons arrived. Deborah had filed suit, demanding half his empire, claiming the divorce had been coerced, claiming the new marriage was fraudulent, and worst of all, demanding a DNA test for the unborn child. Emily sat frozen as Liam read the document aloud, his voice hard as iron. "She isn't just coming after me. She's coming after our family." The storm outside had passed, but inside the mansion, a far darker storm had risen, one that threatened to tear apart everything they had built. And for the first time, Emily understood the truth. This battle wasn't about money or reputation. It was about survival. The courthouse steps were swarmed with flashing cameras, reporters shouting questions that cut like knives. Emily held tightly to Liam's arm, her 7-month belly a visible reminder of what was truly at stake. She had dressed carefully in a navy blazer that barely closed, her hair pinned back, her face calm. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her shake. Inside, the air was heavier, thick with whispers and judgment. Deborah sat at the plaintiff's table in a perfectly tailored black suit, her blonde hair smoothed into a low knot, her face the picture of grace and victimhood. When her eyes met Emily's, a cold smile curved her lips. It was the smile of a woman who believed she had already won. The judge entered and the proceedings began. Deborah's lawyer, Preston Wilde, was slick and theatrical, his words dripping with venom. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he began, "you will hear the story of a woman wronged, a woman betrayed by a husband who staged a fraudulent marriage to conceal his assets, a woman now forced to watch as her place was stolen by another, a Wagios, woman much younger, much more convenient." Emily sat perfectly still as he gestured toward her, painting her as a manipulator, a schemer, a gold digger. Each word was meant to wound, to poison the jury's mind before the defense could speak. She felt Liam tense beside her, but he did not look away from Deborah, his jaw hard, his eyes gray steel. When it was Jonathan's turn, the Blackwoods lawyer rose calmly, his presence commanding without theatrics. "This case," he said firmly, "is not about fraud, it is about revenge." Mrs. Deborah Blackwood signed her divorce willingly, with legal counsel, and accepted a settlement she now wishes to undo. Why? Because her ex-husband found happiness she cannot bear to see. Deborah took the stand first. She wept at the right moments, dabbed her eyes with tissues, her voice trembling with carefully rehearsed heartbreak. Liam was distant, secretive, she claimed. He betrayed me with her. He used this girl to hide his fortune. The baby she carries is not even his. Emily's nails dug into her palms, but she forced herself to remain silent. She could not let Deborah see her break. But when Jonathan stood to cross-examine, the atmosphere shifted. "Mrs. Blackwood," he said smoothly, "you mentioned frequent business trips to New York. Can you provide proof of these trips, perhaps receipts or hotel records?" Deborah hesitated, faltering for the first time. "Not exact records, no." "Interesting," Jonathan replied, "because we have documented proof Mr. Blackwood was in Asheville on those dates, with dozens of witnesses." The courtroom murmured, and Deborah's mask cracked, just slightly. Jonathan pressed on. "And this doctor you claim verified conception dates, Ricardo Martinez. Are you aware he lost his medical license for falsifying records?" Gasps rippled through the room. Deborah's face went pale. Emily felt hope spark inside her chest for the first time in weeks. But the most shocking moment came when Jonathan called a surprise witness. James Morrison, a longtime family acquaintance, took the stand. He recounted a dinner 3 years ago where Deborah, furious over her prenup, had said in front of several guests, "I'll get what's mine, even if I have to destroy him to do it." The words struck the courtroom like lightning. Deborah's composure shattered, her face twisting with rage before she could catch herself. Emily watched in silence, her hand resting on her belly as the tide began to turn. For weeks she had been painted as the villain, the usurper, but now, piece by piece, the truth was surfacing. And when Liam finally rose to take the stand, his voice steady, his eyes unwavering as he spoke of her not as a contract, but as the woman who had broken through his walls, Emily realized this wasn't just a trial. This was a war for their future, and at last, they were winning. But she also knew Deborah wasn't finished. Not yet. And whatever her next move was, it would come with the precision of a woman who had nothing left to lose. Snow fell in heavy sheets the morning the verdict was read, blanketing the courthouse steps in white as though the world itself wanted to purify what had been stained by weeks of lies. Emily walked beside Liam, her swollen belly making every step deliberate, but her chin was high, her hand clasped firmly in his. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was electric, every seat filled, the press packed into the back rows, waiting to devour whatever outcome emerged. The jury filed in, their faces grave. Emily's heart thundered in her chest. She could feel the baby shift as though even the child understood what was at stake. The foreman stood, voice steady as he read the words that would decide their future. In the matter of Deborah Blackwood versus Liam Blackwood, we find in favor of the defendant on all counts. Furthermore, we recommend damages against the plaintiff for fabrication of evidence and attempted fraud. The silence lasted only a heat and heartbeat before it shattered into a storm of noise. Deborah gasped, her carefully constructed mask collapsing into fury as cameras captured every angle of her defeat. Emily clutched Liam's hand, tears spilling down her cheeks, not from fear but from relief so profound it stole her breath. Liam pulled her into his arms right there in front of everyone, whispering into her hair, "It's over, Emily. It's finally over." His voice cracked, the weight of years lifting in that single moment. Deborah was escorted out, her voice rising in a shriek of denial, but it no longer mattered. The empire she had tried to tear apart stood stronger than ever. The love she had tried to poison had only deepened under the pressure. Outside the courthouse, the snow had stopped, leaving the world hushed and white. Reporters surged forward, shouting questions. Emily and Liam ignored them all. He lifted her hand and kissed it, his gray eyes soft, his armor gone. "Our life begins now," he said simply. Months later, the mansion was alive with sounds it had never known before. Laughter, tiny cries, the shuffle of small feet against marble floors. Emily sat in the nursery, cradling their newborn son, Michael, against her chest. Liam stood by the window, watching them with a reverence that made her heart ache. He had become the father he once feared he could never be, gentle, protective, present in every moment. 4 years passed, in the blink of an eye. The mansion was no longer a fortress, but a home filled with warmth. Little Michael raced through the halls with his younger sister Sophie close behind, their laughter echoing against walls that had once known only silence. Emily decorated a birthday cake in the kitchen, her hands sticky with frosting when Liam walked in holding Sophie. He kissed Emily's cheek, his eyes still filled with the same awe they had carried from the first night she told him she loved him. Later, when the children were asleep and the house quiet again, Emily and Liam sat together on the porch, wrapped in blankets, watching the stars scatter across the dark sky. He pulled her close and whispered, "I used to believe love was just another lie waiting to be uncovered. But you proved me wrong. You gave me a family. You gave me everything I never thought I deserved." She smiled against his shoulder. "And you gave me more than safety, Liam. You gave me a forever I never imagined possible." He turned to her then, his eyes shining with tears he no longer felt the need to hide. "Emily, I will spend every day of my life proving to you that forever is real." In that quiet moment, beneath the endless sky, Emily realized the truth of their story. It had begun with a contract, with fear and walls and storms that threatened to break them. But love had transformed everything. The arrangement had become a bond stronger than betrayal, stronger than lies, stronger than Tihan. He passed. And as Liam pressed a kiss to her lips, holding her with the same reverence as on their first night, Emily knew their love was not just survival, it was destiny. A love born in storms, but built to last through every season, a love that would carry them until their last breath. Sometimes the greatest fairy tales begin, not with a kiss of choice, but with a question whispered in the dark. Can I continue? And when the answer is yes, it becomes a love story powerful enough to last a lifetime.